What's the scariest scene from a non-horror movie? If you're anything like me, the first example you'll think of will probably be something from your childhood. It doesn't matter what you watched, be it Disney or DreamWorks or anything in between. A lot of the media we were exposed to as kids had plenty of dark and sinister moments that stick with us to this day. A vengeful witch enacting a curse on her helpless victim, a bigoted old man seeing illusions of his own lust and guilt consume him, a clown dressed in a raincoat with a fireman hat on. There's plenty of terrifying examples I can list from all manner of media that terrified me personally when I was growing up. But for my money, no scene has given me greater chills than this. Picture this. You're a little field mouse who has recently lost her husband, and now you have to care for your 4 children all by yourself. One of them falls ill with pneumonia at the most inopportune time, when the last frost from winter has left the ground and the farmer whose field you're living in is getting ready to start preparing it for spring. The time will soon come for you and your family to move, but there's just one problem.
Your son must stay in bed, not to go outside.
But how long
3 weeks.
So the stakes are well established. Timothy can't get out of bed lest he risk exacerbating his pneumonia to the point of death, but the farmer could begin tending the field any day. And what if that day just happens to be the very next one? Here's a little more perspective. Imagine you're me, a 4 to 5-year-old kid who, for some reason, has decided Don Bluth's 1982 debut theatrical film, The Secret of NIMH, is the movie you're going to watch every morning before preschool without fail. This, despite the fact that you know several moments in the film scare you to death. From the farmer's cat stalking the main characters, to the enigmatic and all-knowing owl who looks and sounds more like a monster than any owl you've ever seen.
Why have you come?
Still, for how many terrifying scenes there are in this movie, the one that never fails to send shivers down your spine and set your hair on edge to this day is the scene where the farmer gets to work on his field. You're probably thinking I'm stalling at this point, aren't you? The most effective part of this scene to me is the sheer amount of build-up we've had towards it. For the last 20 minutes, we've put ourselves fully into the perspective of Mrs. Brisby, gotten to understand who she is as a character and what she's fighting for. Not just for Timothy, but for the safety and future of all her children. If she dies, they have nothing, and she risks death near every time she has to leave her home. Once again, I refer you to the cat aptly named Dragon.
Excuse me, pardon me.
The biggest threat to Mrs. Brisby and her family, though, is the ever-growing concern of moving day.
It cannot be moved for at least 3 weeks.
But moving day is nearly here.
I came here to inform you that the frost is off the ground and moving day is at hand.
In the original book, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH by Robert C. O'Brien, the threat of the farmer's plow is brought up several times and is the reason Mrs. Brisby seeks out the titular rats in both stories. Still, the most we get of the plow in the original story is the farmer turning it on one morning just to see if it still works. And it acts more in the same way as the doomsday clock in a story like Watchmen. Something that is brought up every so often just to remind you that it's there. The sword of Damocles hanging over the characters' heads.
The sword of Damocles is hanging over my head.
In the movie, on the other hand, we see what happens when the sword finally falls. The distant sound of the tractor trying to turn over. The slow zoom into the Brisby house. The creeping dread as the music builds. The almost otherworldly haze the morning has as Mrs. Brisby looks out at the farmhouse. The tension so thick as the shrew pleads with Mrs. Brisby to leave before it's too late. And then... every goddamn time. This, among nearly every other scene in the first 30 or so minutes of the movie, is why The Secret of NIMH is undoubtedly my pick for the scariest non-horror movie I ever saw as a child. And it's not like there wasn't steep competition from a lot of other movies I watched, especially from Don Bluth. You may ask, why then did you decide to watch it every morning without fail? I'll tell you. There were times when I had the good sense to not watch the movie, especially at night, knowing full well the somewhat extreme imagery could and would give me nightmares. Nightmares that I still remember and sometimes still get to this day. So, there was one I remember having pretty early on when it was just Mrs. Brisby screaming at the sight of Dragon, and there was a narrator that was kind of like being weirdly antagonistic about the whole thing, like, oh, don't say I didn't warn you, and she was like not having any of it. And another one I remember having when I was a little kid. It was Nicodemus. Mrs. Brisby was going to see him. She opens the door, and he just kind of like runs out. I think naked, but he was I think he was wearing something, but he was like waving his arms madly, and he was going through the field like just being a madman. It was pretty creepy. He's pretty creepy. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Nicodemus is a pretty creepy character. I don't care if he's... One dream I had about the Great Owl, where it's the scene where she's flying on Jeremy, and they see his house, and right before Jeremy goes, oh, that must be the owl where he lives. Only instead of that scene, it was like this... It was Owl's treehouse from, Winnie the Pooh, but the Great Owl's head was like super huge, sticking out of one of the windows, and he was just kind of looking around, and then he like did a double take, and then he like saw me or Mrs. Brisby or whoever, and he kind of like glared, and then it like cut back, and then it ended up being like my parents' room, and then my dad like was dressed up like an owl, and he was just kind of like waving his arms around. A lot of these dreams involved waving their arms around for some reason. I don't know. It was kind of creepy. Mrs. Brisby is finding out the truth about her husband or something, and then Brutus shows up, and he scares her off, and then it hard cuts to her, like, walking somewhere, like, lamenting on her troubles, and then she meets Jeremy. This is, like, kind of the movie, but out of order. It's weird. Jeremy is, like, singing this weird flamenco song, and then, like, they're in the middle of this field. Like, it's the log that he's supposed to be on in the movie, but it's, like, in the middle of an open field. And they sense that Dragon is coming, and they're looking around to see where he is. But, like, he doesn't show up for a while, then he shows up, and it's creepy. There's one dream where Mrs. Brisby just got straight up chased by a giant spider for, like, well, I guess it would be a regular spider of her, but she got chased by it for, like several minutes straight. And the scenery kept changing, but, like, their pace, like, stayed the same. It was weird. I don't like spiders, so it was distressing all around. I think I had a dream that was like a semi-sequel to the movie, where it ended up that, like, Martin was the Great Owl, and that, like, I don't know how it happened. I don't understand, but it was better than the actual sequel. There was one dream I had about the plow scene itself, I think, but it was kind of like the movie, but not, so it gave it that dreamy kind of weird feeling to it. I can't describe half of this. Yet for all the ghastly images and dread-filled atmosphere, The Secret of NIMH was always a movie I found myself going back to. I'd eventually wean off watching it every day, but every so often I'd pop it on again as a kid and remind myself of how utterly terrifying it was. Especially that goddamn tractor scene. Alright, we get it. It wasn't until I was a little older and starting to really analyze the movies I liked that I decided that NIMH was legitimately my favorite animated movie in general. And I think part of that is because of how much it scared me as a kid. How it can still kind of unnerve me even as I near my late 20s. Because no matter how many times the build-up to the tractor turning over sends a chill down my spine, I realized a long time ago that this is the kind of moody storytelling that I respect the most. Some of my other favorite movies rely heavily on the same kind of atmosphere and build-up that we see just before the farmer starts to work on his field. And not just straight-up horror movies either. I'm talking about other non-horror examples, like the slower, almost ethereal opening to Disney's The Jungle Book. It was common for the Disney movies of the time to open with some mood-setting music and maybe a storybook, and they were usually pretty jovial scores that didn't get too dark in tone. Now, The Jungle Book, on the other hand. Tell me you don't feel just a little uneasy watching these opening credits. Nothing's happening, sure, it's just location shots and a list of names, but the music suggests an air of foreboding mystery as we see each name and location go by. That something could happen at any moment, like a panther could wander from out of the leaves, or a snake could drop down from the treetops. Or maybe...
That was a cheap move.
The Jungle Book is far from the only example of a looming sense of dread in the old Disney movies. Ask anyone about the old Disney classics, and probably some of the first scenes that will come to their heads are the creepy ones. Snow White running for her life in the creepy forest, the transformation scene in Pinocchio, Maleficent luring Aurora to her doom in Sleeping Beauty. There's a plethora of bone-chilling scenes to be found in movies a lot of people are quick to brush off as kid stuff. For my money, though, what made some of these scenes stick out is the same reason the plow scene sticks out to me and a lot of other people who grew up watching NIMH. Many of these scenes would fall flat if we hadn't had the proper build-up to get to know and empathize with some of these characters. To have ample foreshadowing that something bad is going to happen. I mean, what would the transformation scene in Pinocchio be without this little nugget of joy?
They never come back as boys.
A lot of straight-up horror movies live and die on the rules of planting and payoff, and the same is true of any other genre. To name another Disney example, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is remembered most of all for the last 10 minutes, where Ichabod Crane runs for his life from the Headless Horseman. But the preceding 20 minutes before the climax are mostly comedic, with some of the best slapstick in any Disney film. This makes the sudden turn into Creepersville all the more unsettling, and the build-up to Ichabod's fateful encounter with the Horseman is some of the most tense build-up in any adaptation I've ever seen of this story. It's often surprising just how much animated movies were able to get away with back in the day, be they from the 1940s or the 1980s. The Motion Picture Association of America, or the MPAA for short, has always been kind of questionable at how it rates movies, but up until fairly recently, they would rate nearly every animated movie as G. The Secret of NIMH in particular, which not only has plenty of tension-filled scenes, but also a fair amount of blood, 3 on-screen murders, and 1 use of the word damn, was still given a G rating despite all that. Nowadays, they seem to have the inverse problem, where even the most agreeable family movie from the likes of Pixar won't be rated anything less than PG, which may or may not have been in response to the sort of backlash of Toy Story 3's G rating. Can't imagine why. I never want to be that guy who complains about how things aren't what they used to be back in my day, but there's a distinct lack of fear in most media geared towards kids nowadays. Everyone has their own limits on what they classify as scary or tense, to be fair, but I'm not sure if many of the more contemporary animated films will be remembered for that one really scary scene. For my money, the last truly terrifying kids movie to come out was Coraline, and that was all the way back in 2009. This is such a shame when you consider that most kids actually like being scared. Again, there's varying degrees as to how much one child can take. And I know I certainly wasn't gearing up to watch Freddy vs. Jason when I was a kid the same way my other peers were. But that didn't mean I was completely averse to horror either. I would eagerly look forward to the many Halloween specials that would come on TV, or bravely sit through scenes like Night on Bald Mountain without giving them much thought. Even the dreaded tractor scene from NIMH. I feel like I didn't properly comprehend the exact horror of that scene until I was a little older and able to understand existential dread. Thanks, adult life! And while I may scoff every time I see a kid brought to a horror film, or at least I did back when theaters were open, thanks, COVID! That's pretty good. There's nothing to say that those kids weren't in their exact element, and not just dragged along because their parents couldn't find a more appropriate movie for them. Hell, I feel like some of the kids who were in my showings of movies like The Vivitch or the Halloween reboot handled those movies a lot better than the adults around them.
Oh, shit!
It's rare to see a straight-up horror movie or show geared towards kids, but that doesn't mean a lot of the content they see won't have elements of horror in them. And I don't think it's entirely out of the question to want more horror-light content in children-based media. That's what makes recent shows like Infinity Train, The Owl House, and especially Over the Garden Wall so unique in my opinion. How none of them seem to be pulling their punches in terms of trying to scare the bejesus out of their target audience. What made the old Disney movies of yesteryear work so well was how they used horror-like elements to demonstrate familiar messages. How Snow White's fears run away with her, and make her view a mundane forest as an eldritch terror house. How Pinocchio and Lampwick's transformation into donkeys shows how you shouldn't throw caution and societal rules to the wind just for the hell of it. Kids can learn a lot of lessons from horror and horror-light tropes. They've been unconsciously learning these lessons ever since they were old enough to read a fairy tale. Don Bluth based a lot of his work in the 1980s off the old Disney movies too, following their formula of often dark subject matter with likable characters and lessons learned through the fear they go through. In the case of NIMH and the tractor scene, Mrs. Brisby shows no small amount of courage, you get it, because she's a mouse and she's small, anyway, in facing down the plow. Again, a less than 1-inch mouse faces a tractor head-on just to save her son, even when she knows she's way over her head and has no possible hope in stopping it, risking her own life in the process. But every terror she faces in the film, every seemingly impossible nightmare she encounters, she does so wearing that fear on her sleeve. I think what ultimately makes The Secret of NIMH so special to me is because of the scary imagery, and how Mrs. Brisby is probably 10 times more afraid of the circumstances she's in than I ever was. But seeing her face each one and ultimately be rewarded for her bravery was one of the most influential lessons I could have ever learned as a kid. That you can be absolutely petrified of the circumstances you're in, and still face them head on. That is true courage. And if it took a few nightmares and goosebumps to learn that message every time the tractor turned over, then I think it was well worth it.
Hey everybody, this is Film Freak here. Well, at least that's, my internet moniker anyway. And this is my pet dragon. Yeah. I named him after the cat from Secret of NIMH because I've always wanted to do that. And he's a good kitty. Anyway, I wanted to, just take a moment and say thank you for, I'm whispering because my wife is sleeping, to say thank you for subscribing. I got a lot of subscribers recently from the Owl House video that last time I checked hit over 2,000 views, and that's really incredible. I was not expecting that at all. Thanks a lot for that. Thank you so much. To those who have subscribed to me, I have some general ideas of where I want to take this channel. More videos like this, basically, just talking about some general elements of movies I like, and maybe analyzing some characters and such, and maybe some somewhat conventional review-type videos. Yeah, well, we'll just have to see. But I hope you stick around. If you don't, I understand. Hi, Dragon. Dragon, say hi to the people. Let them see your face. Let them see your face. Let them see your face. Oh, where are you going? Where are you going? Dragon, let them see your face. Dragon. Oh, there's Dragon. Hi, Dragon. Oh, he's a good boy. He's a good boy. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, just, if you're new to the channel, if you've subscribed, thanks so much. I promise to get more regular content out soon, and I hope you like it. And, that's about it. I will see you guys later. Say bye, dragon. Good boy.